Hello and welcome to another episode of the Adobe Creative Suite Podcast. My name is Terry White, and in this special episode we get to take a look at the brand new update to Photoshop CS6 for Creative Cloud. So we're going to see kind of a cool thing at the end that's available for all Photoshop users, but everything else I'm going to concentrate on are the new updates that just became available for Adobe Creative Cloud members. So let's dive right in and take a look. The first thing we're going to talk about is the new support for smart filters for liquify and the blur filters. So for example, if I go up to my filter menu, I can convert this image for smart filters. We could have done that before. However, now that I've converted it for smart filters, the next thing I can do is go up to the filter menu and come down to liquify. Liquify has now been enabled to be a smart filter, basically the ability to have it be non-destructive. You can always go back in and make adjustments. So I see like these protrusions coming out from the back of her neck, which of course is her spine. And while that is naturally her spine, that doesn't mean that we want to actually see it in our picture. So I would normally go in and just do a tad bit of liquify on an image like this, just to smooth it out in areas. And maybe even do something with the hair. Well, not that bad, but smooth out the hair, maybe make the brush a little bit bigger and do things like that. So once we're done, at this point, if I clicked OK in the previous version of Photoshop, that filter would then be permanent on those pixels unless I was to do an undo or revert or have a layer or a previous version or something like that. But now it's actually a smart filter. So I can go in and turn it off, turn it back on, which is cool, but most importantly, I can go back in if I did too much or didn't do enough and get right back to where I was. So I don't have to worry about starting over from scratch if I did too much or starting over from scratch if I didn't do enough. I can go right back to the image that I was already working on with the smart filter and continue to do more or undo or as much. So cool to be able to do that, and smart filters work also across video files. So we have this video file here. I'm going to bring up the timeline, and we can see that we've got just this one clip. I'll go ahead and play it. And we've got kind of a video of photo session going on there. And what I'd love to do is be able to apply one of the new smart blur filters or blur filters to this. So we'll go in and we'll do again, convert for smart filters. And then we'll use the new blur gallery that was introduced in Photoshop CS6. For example, I can do a tilt shift blur, which I haven't really demoed that a lot. So we can go in and we can tilt this. Let's bring this down. Let's tilt it a little bit the other way. And then we'll bring this up a little bit. And now that is applying that blur throughout the image, but only outside of this area that I've got it tilted into. So now when we click OK, and this is really important because these blur gallery filters were, again, once you clicked OK, that was it. There was no getting back to what you did. So we can play the video.
This way?
And of course, it's going to render it on the fly as best it can based on the performance of your machine. And I can see that I really like a little bit more blur at the bottom underneath the chin. So before, again, undo, start over again. But now I can just jump right back in, double click on the blur gallery, get right back to those same settings I was working on and move that up a bit and maybe even increase the blur to make it more dramatic. So once I click OK, again, non-destructive, turn it on, turn it off. And this again works, of course, on still images, but I am applying it across a video. So I get the tilt shift blur, the iris blur, basically the blur gallery filters that you've been using on your still images. Now they're smart filter enabled to be able to use on your still images and video as well. All right, let's jump into the next one here, which is really kind of cool. We've got this image. Here, let me switch back to my standard workspace here. We've got this image that I want to apply a watermark to. So I'm going to bring up my Actions panel. And in the Actions panel, we've got our regular default actions that come with Photoshop. And I've got a watermark set of actions here. Now, in the past, if I had a portrait image and a landscape image, I would have to worry about creating different actions to apply that watermark in different places, depending on the orientation of the images. And I'd have to run it on all my portrait images first, and then run it on all my landscape images next. And I'd have to do them in, have to separate them and do them in batch to run the right action on the right set of images. Well, this update includes conditional actions, basically an if statement. So if the image is portrait, do this set of steps. If the image is landscape, do this set of steps. If the image is a certain resolution, do this. If it's a certain color space, do that. Basically, your imagination, whatever you want the if statement to control. So instead of me having to run the landscape one and the portrait one separately, I've got this new one that, again, it will determine based on the image. If it's landscape, put it in one corner. If it's portrait, put it in another. So I can run the same action, run it here once, and it puts the watermark in the lower left corner of a portrait image. But if I go to the landscape image and run it, it puts it in the upper right corner. So running the same action on multiple images, it will determine what it needs to do based on what it was set up to do, based on what it sees in the image. Great to see conditional actions here now for the first time in Photoshop. All right, let's move on. And I made a big deal about the cropping tool when it first came out in Photoshop CS6 with all the new abilities. And we heard some feedback. We heard your feedback on how you even wanted it to be better, or in some cases, you kind of missed maybe one or two features from CS5. So let's hit the letter C to go to the crop tool. And of course, we can pull in the handles like we always did, which is kind of cool. But now we made it much easier for you to not only enter the width and height, but what was missing or what was buried was the resolution. So you want to crop an image, for example, maybe your Facebook profile picture, you wanted 813 width by 351 height, and you wanted it at 72 pixels per inch or 144 pixels per inch or whatever. Now you can go ahead and put in that resolution. Also, what returns is the ability to crop just the front image. So if you're working with multiple layers and you only want to crop a certain, just the front image or images that are stacked, you can do that as well without having to crop them all. So cropping enhancements for a feature that I think was already great, we just made them a lot better. Now this next one is going to make our web designers really, really happy. And that is, when you think about web design, although we build the actual sites in web tools like Dreamweaver or Muse, the actual design or the mock-up of the site often takes place in Photoshop. People go into Photoshop and draft up what the page will look like to show it to the client and get the client's buy-off on it before they actually go and build it in a web tool. So Photoshop is actually one of the most used web tools for that matter. So now let's go in and let's take a look at this page. Again, a mock-up in Photoshop of what they might want the page to look like. And of course, using fonts and colors and gradients and all these cool things. Well, what if you could cut down some of that, once they buy off on it, not having to build it all from scratch from back in the Dreamweaver? So for example, we have the ability, I'm going to first of all head over to Adobe Edge Code Preview. And you can download this from your Creative Cloud membership as well. And I've got the CSS for this site as well as the HTML for this page. So I'm just going to go ahead and say, open up this HTML in Chrome. I have my Chrome browser open up here. And let's see here. So let's quit Chrome. Let's try that again. There we go. So open up the page in the Chrome browser, and it's just my standard text. Not very exciting. So what makes that text and the layout of this page look better is CSS, Cascading Style Sheets. So let's head over to Photoshop. And what I love to do is the background is this nice gradient. I'd love to not have to recreate that gradient in CSS. So I can just right click on this background. Now in Photoshop, there's a new command called copy CSS. So when we choose copy CSS, we head back over to Edge Preview, and we can go ahead, Adobe Edge Code, and we can go ahead and paste in that CSS. Now, when we, again, look at that HTML page in our browser, we scroll down and there's our gradient background. It's already updating the HTML file. All right, pretty cool. Now let's go ahead and head back to Photoshop and copy our next item. Our next item is going to be, so let's go back to Photoshop. Our next item is going to be in the hero area. We're going to copy the gear text CSS. So we'll copy that. We'll head back over to Adobe Edge Code, and we'll just paste that in underneath the existing CSS. And again, we'll head back over to Chrome, take a look at it, and again, it's already updating in the background. So Edge Code is tied to Chrome, and it's automatically doing this in the background for us. So we're basically designing the CSS or having Photoshop write CSS for us from Photoshop and pasting it into whatever web tool you want. So we could be pasting this into Dreamweaver as well. All right, let's do one more. Head back over to Photoshop. We can also not only just copy individual layers, but we can copy entire groups. So we can say copy the CSS for everything inside that group. Head over to, it's doing it. Okay, head over to Edge Code Preview. Let's paste it in. And now let's head over to Chrome, where it's designed that entire piece. So as you see, it's basically taking the HTML and styling it with the CSS that Photoshop has generated. Very, very cool. All right, there's a couple more things I want to talk about before we leave the whole styling aspect of this, and that is, if we head over to our swatches, we now have a new ability that we can go in and we can load swatches like we always did from other swatch libraries, but we can also load the swatches from a CSS file, and this is great for web design. So if you had an existing site and you wanted to keep using the same colors, you can just load in the swatches from the CSS of that site and keep using them in your new design. So here they are, just appended onto the other existing swatches that I had here. Now, of course, in CS6, we introduced paragraph and character styles. And what's new in this update is we now have the ability to set default styles for your new documents. So for example, this document has header, footer, promo link, and shadow text. And let's say I wanted those styles to always be present whenever I create a new document. I'm always using those same styles over and over and over again. So instead of having to load them every single time, I open up a document that has the styles in it that I want, and now I have a new ability to say save default type styles. Once I do that, every new document I create in Photoshop or every document I open in Photoshop from that point on will have those styles available to me to use. And of course, that works both for your paragraph and character styles as well. So same menu command, save default styles. Very cool, styling, great, love it. Love these little bits, these tidbits and these updates that come out for Creative Cloud members. I'm not a web guy, but I know I like things to be easier than harder, and I would love to have Photoshop write things for me. And again, based on my design that I did in Photoshop. All right, so the next thing here, we're going to head over to this next image, and this image is 3D. Now, of course, Photoshop CS6 Extended does 3D objects, and we can go in. Here we can turn off this timeline view here, and we can play around with this with the Move tool to, in fact, don't crop, to in fact see that this is actual 3D. So we're moving this in the Z space. We're moving this back and forth. Now, what's new is the ability to use 32-bit color to enhance or light an object. So, I'm not a 3D guy. I'm not going to get into a lot of the technicality behind this, but what I can do is just simply turn on this new illuminated layer to illuminate that pluralist 3D text. And it is basically illuminating it with a new 32-bit color option. So lots of little enhancements also along the way to speed up previews and just make your 3D experience better. Now I get to show you the last thing, which is the thing I'm actually most excited about, and that is if you're a Mac user and you have a Retina display on a MacBook Pro 15-inch or 13-inch, or by the time you watch this video, whatever other MacBook or Apple product that has a Retina display on it, or Mac product that has a Retina display on it, you'll be good to go. So the long-awaited update to Photoshop that adds Retina support is here. So we've been working in it the whole time. So my menus, all my text, all my buttons, all the thousands and thousands of icons in Photoshop have been redrawn from scratch to be Retina compliant. And of course, because Photoshop is in multiple shades of black or gray or white, because you can tune the interface, it means those objects had to be drawn in all those different shades as well. So that takes a while. So let's go in and let's see what that means as far as working with our images. Now, this is an image I've used in the past. When I was out on my CS6 tour, I used this image quite a bit to show content aware move. The one thing I could never do before is actually look at this image at 100% and see all of it. And that's exactly what we're doing right now. If you look at the lower left-hand corner here, we're viewing this image at 100%. And I know if you hadn't seen it before in the old version of Photoshop, you don't get it. You don't think, well, why is that a big deal? I can see some images at 100%. But the point is, the larger the image, the larger the resolution. Without that Retina support, you're going to have to zoom in, scroll around, and move around a lot. To make my point, I've got a screen capture of this exact image at 100% inside the previous version of Photoshop CS6 before this update. So let's head over to Adobe Bridge, where I've got the screen capture, and this is as much of that image as we'd be able to see at 100%. So let's again head back over to Photoshop. We can see all of it here. We can see that much of it here. So in the previous version of Photoshop, not only were all your icons and your text kind of a little fuzzy at Retina quality or Retina display, but your image was also not taking advantage of all those pixels or all that resolution of your Retina display. So in order for me to see that image on a non-Retina display Photoshop on a Retina display Mac, I'd have to zoom it down to 50%. So if we get out of it here, this is it at 50% inside Photoshop to be able to see all of it before the Retina update. So I hope you benefited from this video, and I hope you can't wait to download your copy of the Photoshop CS6 update for Creative Cloud. Just as excited as I was, and that is now available as of today, or as of the time you're watching this video. It's now available. So just head over to creative.adobe.com and get your update. And if you're a regular CS6 user, you can still get the Retina update, just not all the other features without being a cloud member. Take care. We'll catch you next time.